these events that we had last year, we had 3 or 4 installers who we considered to be.
So let's get into it. I'm very happy to introduce to you Steve Breit today. Steve is a core team member for Mass Energize, which is a 501c3 nonprofit which helps organize community sustainability action and engagement. And he is also a co-founder of the HeatSmart Alliance, which takes the community coaching model that's similar to the HeatSmart Massachusetts and expands upon it, developing best practices and educational materials for heat pump adoption. Steve will be discussing today more about the HeatSmart Alliance and actions that we can all be taking and in our communities. So Steve, on to you.
All right, thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. So I have a brief presentation today, and I'll go through that and ask you to, we're a relatively small group, but there's some point of clarification, then just unmute and turn it on. But if it's a question that you think is going to require a more extended answer, please, as Andy said, put it in the chat and we'll try to get to as many as we can in this breakout session. So let me share my screen. So what I want to do today is introduce the HeatSmart Alliance because we're a relatively young organization. Really, the founding documents were created just over a year ago, and we got a fiscal sponsor just a couple of months ago. So very young organization. Both Mass Energize, which I'm also a contributor to, and HeatSmart Alliance have a similar role with respect to grassroots groups and communities. In our community, Wayland, we have Energize Wayland as the local energy entity, and many of you have, I know I see Craig Foreman on from Green Newton. Many of you have local organizations, and I see Mass Energize and HeatSmart Alliance as overlays providing particular kinds of support to the local organizations. In the case of Mass Energize, it's help with setting up a website where people that engages people, and also outreach tools and playbooks for holding events. In the case of HeatSmart Alliance, we've collected a growing and quite formidable collection of people who are, some of them have quite a bit of technical background in heat pumps, and some of them are more on the marketing side. So we are a resource for this specialized area. So we were inspired by many of the people in the HeatSmart Alliance now were in the HeatSmart Mass programs that Mass CEC sponsored, and we in fact have some participation by several individuals who are also working for Mass CEC, although they keep their interests separate. And we received their permission to use the HeatSmart moniker for HeatSmart Alliance, and it's a nice tie-in because that program had already established itself. Our mission is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by accelerating heat pump adoption in residences and buildings. So far, most of our efforts are on the residential side, but we have aspirations to also address commercial buildings. The particular technologies that we address are air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and heat pump water heaters. But we do it with knowledge that thermal enclosure or weatherization measures also go hand in hand with heat pumps. And while we have some people on the who are part of the organization with expertise in that area, that's not our primary focus. We're all volunteers with an electorate. We tried to keep the structure simple, although we do have a fair amount of process and try to be egalitarian in letting people participate. We have an elected facilitator, currently Bob Zog of Carlisle, who's just doing an outstanding job, and a treasurer, Brad Hubbard Nelson, who some of you may know from Concord. And currently we have 2 levels of membership. We call them members and associates. the members have voting privileges and also some responsibility to participate in our working groups. Associates may choose to that lower level because they have some other professional activity or other interests that may conflict with the HeatSmart Alliance interests. But we encourage their participation. We have people from over 21 Massachusetts towns participating now, representing over 200,000 households. So it's hard to top what Senator Barrett said this morning. I'll basically repeat it in case I suspect that everybody in this room understands at this point the importance of home heating and cooling. In Massachusetts, residential energy use, in New England, residential use is about 30%, and out of that 30%, about 60% is for space heating and cooling, of which most of that is heating in today's climate. About 15 to 20% is hot water. There's a little bit for clothes dryers, and the rest is other uses of energy, electrical energy powering your computer, cooking, and so forth. The point of calling out these three sectors is about 80% of that is addressable by heat pump technology. Yes, there are heat pump dryers available now. If you were replacing your dryer, it's certainly something you'd consider. But the biggest piece of this is space heating and cooling, or keeping your house warm. And the paths, again, this is a holistic view. The paths to decarbonization are first to do as much as you can for weatherization, air sealing, and insulation are critical. Electrifying the heating with heat pump technologies, not with the old school electric resistance heating for sure, although in some cases that might be a backup in extreme cold conditions. And rooftop solar. And the only reason that rooftop solar or renewable electricity is listed here last, rooftop solar in particular, as I understood, and this may no longer be the case, that they, in sizing your rooftop solar array, they would look at your past years or your historical energy use as your historical electricity use. And if you put in a heat pump, that historical use is going to go up a lot. So if that's still true, then you want to have the use of the heat at least a year or more of the heat pump use under your belt before they size that solar array, so that the heat pump factors in, and the heat pump's going to have a pretty substantial impact on your electricity use. You know, again, this is sort of, I think, preaching to the choir. You've heard that from Senator Barrett, 27% of state greenhouse gas emissions from heating and cooling. And, you know, this graphic was straight out of the 2050 decarbonization roadmap, that most homes are going to be electric and efficient using heat pumps for heating and cooling. And so this is a big thing. It's one of the most impactful things that a homeowner can do. And then in this interim 2030 Clean Energy and Climate Plan that's open for comment right now, there's a target of converting 1 million homes to heat pumps by 2030. Just as a guideline, there are about 3 million households in Massachusetts, from what I understand. So 1 million it should be properly said households here, not homes. There's a distinction, of course. And 1 million households, that's about a third of that stock. And I think what drives that number is the notion that the typical lifespan for a home heating system is about 30 years. So in 10 years, which is the scope of this 2030 plan, you would replace about a third of those 3 million household heating systems. What's a heat pump? Again, not sure of the levels of I recognize some of the faces here, and I'm sure this is pretty basic stuff for some of you, but you already have heat pumps in your home. They're called refrigerators or dehumidifiers or air conditioners, but they're essentially moving thermal energy from a colder spot to a warmer spot. And so that's what heat pumps do. They're available for home heating and cooling, for water heating now, sometimes called hybrid water heaters, clothes drying, and pool heating, should you have that energy sink in your yard. Again, probably not in this audience, but maybe you do. And the concept, very simple idea, way of explaining it is, and this would be true for air source heat pumps where you're getting the thermal energy from the outdoor air, is you're taking in, roughly speaking, 2 units of thermal energy from the outdoor air, combining that with a unit of electricity and getting 3 units of heat in the home. So that seems too good to be true when you talk about efficiencies for heat pumps of 300% and more. It's known as coefficient of performance, or COP. That is typical factor for air source heat pumps is about 3. For ground source heat pumps, it can be considerably higher, in the 5 to 6 range, because there you're taking energy from the ground, which stays at about 55 degrees year round. Heat pumps got a bad name in this climate from installations that were done in the 90s and maybe even earlier. So I know we have one in Wayland where they were put in the mid 80s. And those heat pumps were really not suitable for heating in colder temperatures, and often had backup electric resistance and resulted in pretty high energy bills, electricity bills for those. Mostly it was done in condos. Today they work well in our cold climate, deliver warm, comfortable air, and they're very reliable machines. Especially that question about reliability comes up again, but you're comparing with fossil fuel equipment, boilers and furnaces. They're far more reliable than boilers and furnaces today, and certainly require a lower level of maintenance than those conventional heating systems. And again, the heat pump is one of the more expensive and complex things that a homeowner can do to add one to their house. So because of that expense and complexity, there are these situations where it's most economic. One is the existing heating or cooling system is aged out, and at that point you don't want to wait for the system to fail and have to replace it on a 5-degree winter day. You want to do that because it does take time to get quotes for new systems, weeks to months to make a decision. And so you don't want to be doing that under pressure. It's something that's planned. One thing that I've learned, especially with residential systems, that if there's a legacy furnace, the furnace might be good, or boiler, and that's providing the heat, but the air conditioner needs replacement. You actually want to look at replacing. Maybe there's another 5 or 10 years left in the heating system, but you want to look at replacing them both at the same time, and vice versa. If the furnace or boiler needs replacing, you have to look at replacing the air conditioner. So that does accelerate a expenditure for the homeowner, but it often, in terms of getting an efficient solution, that often makes sense. And that's for homes that have existing central ducting. If the home does not have ducting, then it often you can add a heat pump, and it has minimal interaction with the existing heating system, but you do need some electrical integration of the two so that they function together. So the second situation that's kind of a no-brainer is if the home doesn't have air conditioning and you want to add it. There are still some homes like this. And then you want to get people to consider a heat pump, not an air conditioner. And the additional cost of the heat pump is really pretty small compared to the overall cost of the installation. And in many cases, today's mass save incentives will cover the extra cost of a heat pump over an air conditioner. So I just this week, for example, saw somebody posting on my next door community. They wanted to add central air conditioning to their home, and I piped up and said, well, you really ought to put in a heat pump, not a air conditioner. And so this is an education issue for consumers. As I think the installers, by and large, many of the better ones now will just quote heat pumps, but they do. I've still seen people quoting for just air conditioners, and I wish this new climate bill would just outlaw air conditioners, but they're still legal. So, and the third situation is building or an addition, either renovating or building an addition to the house, and then you can really design it so that a heat pump could provide 100% of the heating, cooling needs. And from this draft 2030 Clean Energy and Climate Plan, this is text right out of it about this logic about doing the heat pump change at the point that the existing system needs replacement. All right, so what about HeatSmart Alliance? We educate this. These photos on the right were taken early last March. It seems quaint now, but we had these meetings. I hope we didn't cause anybody to get sick as a result of these meetings, because they were in late February, early March last year. But we were able to get over 100 attendees at events in Concord and Wayland through effective outreach, and which we had help from local organizations in doing that. And so that's one of the activities we have. I've written a playbook on what we did to organize those events. So that's something we plan to make available through HeatSmart Alliance and Mass Energize. The second thing that I'm found doing a lot and personally rewarding is coaching one-on-one to individual homeowners. And we've been working now for almost a year. We're about to roll out the HeatSmart Alliance coaching model. We've done quite a bit of work and thinking on how the coaching could be done by volunteer coaches, thinking through liability issues and process and tools that the coaches need to help homeowners. And I've found that both rewarding and effective. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. And as I said at the beginning, we're kind of an overlay. We'd like grassroots and community groups to look at HeatSmart Alliance as a resource. Maybe you need a speaker at an event, or you'd like some heat pump expertise. Please get in touch with us and call on us, and we'll see if we can help you out. We're also establishing relationships with installers. So at these events that we had last year, we had 3 or 4 installers who we considered to be good installers to participate in the events and talk with people. And the installers found that quite rewarding. They got quite a number of leads. We were careful not to say we're endorsing these installers, but certainly the inference by their presence at the event was that we thought they were reasonable choice for installers. And we're also in touch with other groups like the Mass CEC and NEEP, and hope to be in touch. We've interacted a lot with Concord Municipal Light Plant, who now is starting a coaching program, and several other communities that have coaching programs. And the final thing is to influence or feedback from our experiences to the industry, to the installers, to manufacturers on what we learn about customer needs, and also to inform state and local policy about heat pumps. So just on coaching, this is typically what I've been doing and what's part of the HeatSmart Alliance model. We've developed an approach to collecting information through a questionnaire and reviewing their energy bills. Typically then meet with the homeowner or resident for an hour or two to discuss issues and options, and get them pointed at some installers who may be able to may be appropriate for their situation. And then they go off and get some quotes. Inevitably, they're going to get a range of solutions and prices. It's quite surprising sometimes, the range of price range that customers get, and also the quoting style. There can be some quotes are pretty sparse, and others have just every single item laid out and completely baffling to the homeowners. And so we can help with reviewing the quotes and suggesting follow-up questions to the installers. But we're really there to help them decide. We're not making the decision for them. It's we want to get the homeowner comfortable enough so that they make their own decision about which way they're going. And then following up on the energy use and cost, and making sure that the heat pumps being really taking over a significant percentage of the heating load in that house. So how to engage for individuals, from our website, you can ask help from a volunteer heating coach. We have a handful of coaches available now. And in certain communities, that's something we need to scale up in the coming year. And we've worked on this, how we're going to do that, and we're just about to roll that out. We encourage folks to join us as a member associate, and then become a coach. We need more coaches. Again, I've found it to be very rewarding. I can look back now at about close to 20 homes where I've personally coached and helped them get a heat pump in the last year, and that feels pretty satisfying to me. Or you can donate. We, like all, we're nonprofit. We have a HEAT, which Fiscal, the home energy efficiency team. They're doing some really innovative programs around geothermal micro districts for heat pumps, and that are really addressing the conundrum of what becomes of the gas companies, and taking that bull by the horn, so to speak. So really have to do a shout out for HEAT. Oh my gosh. All right, I guess we can stay open. I guess I haven't been keeping track of time here.
And we started late, so I just figured we would end late as well. If anyone feels like they need to drop off, that's totally fine. But I think we can stay on for 10 more minutes or so.
All right.
Yeah.
And then for communities, we've had some requests for speakers. Reach out to us or involve us, and let us help you with a green heating or cooling event. And finally, for installers, get on our mailing list and participate in events. So with that, I'll wrap up and open it to questions. And you can see what we're about at heatsmartalliance.org, or send us email at info@heatsmartalliance.org. And the email, we have somebody monitoring it, so it won't that wasn't the case always, but we are monitoring it now. So I'll open to questions.
Yeah. So Tom, I'm gonna give the floor to Tom Mikas.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom Mikas. I'm in Rockport. I'm into ground source heat pumps. I installed them in my house 6 years ago with mixed results, and we can talk about that if you want to. But my main interest is getting municipal buildings all electrified, and we have very few opportunities to do that in a town like Rockport. We just designed a new DPW facility, and they were going to heat it all with oil. We don't have any natural gas here. I managed to convince them to put air source heat pumps in the administrative wing of this DPW facility, but there's a vehicle maintenance wing. And they claim that that's never been done. Nobody's ever put a heat pump there. And this is working with Weston and Sampson, our designers. I got on the internet and found an example in Boise, Idaho, where somebody built one, but they claim it just can't be done. And so they went ahead and did that design. Fortunately or unfortunately, the bids came back and they're over budget. So they need to go back out to bid. But how can we convince municipalities to do this, even if it's a first of a kind?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. I personally haven't had a lot of experience with beyond the residential sector. So, and we have some folks. I would say that for that sort of thing, I have a list from Concord Municipal Light Plant of engineers who you really need to engage at that level. It's well beyond volunteer capabilities, in my opinion. and you'd need to find, there are engineering firms out there who can help you, and I could share that list with you that was put together by Concord Municipal Light Plant. But there are folks out there who, I think it's possible your design and engineering firm just didn't have the experience and didn't know where to look, but I think there are experts out there.
Deborah, you got your hand up.
Yes. What we need to do is actually have buildings that are net zero, or when the brief is developed by the municipality, the brief for the architects, it has to be in there right from the get-go. That's where we have to do it. Trying to get municipalities to retrospectively put it in later is not the way to go. And I'm a British architect. I'm not meant to call myself an architect in Massachusetts, but you know, this is the biggest issue we have, is not briefing or ensuring that our towns build properly early.
Yeah. But at the same time, Deborah, I would submit that there's so many existing, so much of the, we absolutely, for new buildings, it sounds like this new law will get us there. Maybe it could be faster. But my concern is the existing, to get this retrofit in existing buildings is, which are the bulk of the emissions load right now. You have to be pragmatic about it.
I agree with you. I think it's the new buildings that we have to say, we have to go to zero now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see a few hands up. I just want to ask, are these questions on the current topic or changing direction?
Current topic.
All right, we'll go over to you guys at Natick Sustainability.
Yeah, hi. I'm on the Sustainability Committee here, and Natick has had a very well received Natick program. A couple years back, we have one of the highest per capita solar energy in the whole state, and we just posted an RFP to do a similar program for heat pumps, and we posted on the state's bulletin board. I guess we're just starting to get some coming in. It sounded like Steve. Well, do you know Jillian Wilson Martin or?
Yes, I do, and I'm in touch. Sam Gifford, and I think he's part of your committee. He's a member of HeatSmart Alliance, and
so they've already tried to tap into you for a list of some installers, vendors.
Yeah. We have taken a direction in the HeatSmart. I know the solar program, was Solarized Mass program, was incredibly successful. HeatSmart, when you really, and HeatSmart, the HeatSmart programs had some success, but the numbers were much lower in general than the Solarized. And I'll put in my personal view. Although I think many of the other HeatSmart Alliance members would share this, is that heat pumps are actually more complicated than solar. The interface with the house is the roof. For solar, you're going into the house, and I'll tell you, from looking in probably 40 homes in the last year, there's no such thing as a standard house. There's houses that are similar, but everyone's in this area. There's so many houses that have had this renovation or that renovation and have these screwball setups now, and it's a much harder problem. And I'm somewhat personally skeptical about trying to pick favorites with installers, that the ability of a local committee to screen an installer. And I think the other thing that's true is some of the largest installers did not participate in those programs. They don't need to, and they're busy, and those companies are successful for a reason, because they provide a higher level of what I would call customer experience in many of them than the smaller contractors. There are good smaller contractors, but the customer experience can be less even with the smaller ones. So the approach that I've personally taken is this coaching approach, that if we can scale the coaching to get people help with choosing installers, but not to pick favorites, I think that could be more effective.
That's where Sam comes in. Just to your point about the challenges sometimes with a circa 1872 family house here. I had 2 solar arrays, and then I had a Fujitsu heat pump with 4 heads installed. It was it took
Yeah.
some creativity to get it to work, but it's been a great investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve, there's a question in the chat about, is HeatSmart Alliance doing any outreach to builders and developers?
We have not as yet, no. And that would certainly be something we'd like to do. It would be aspirational. We've mostly, a lot of our energy, no pun intended, has been focused on getting this coaching off the ground, but also on the retrofit situations, and as opposed in the replacement situations, which are happening day after day. And every one that happens, I want to cry when somebody just does the easy thing and replaces their oil boiler with another oil boiler without adding a heat pump or replacing the oil boiler.
I'm gonna pass the mic to Rick Devereaux.
Thank you. Just quickly, one, I put a note in there in the chat for anyone who wants to contact me about and the one thing I would share is that universally, all of the 3 different installers that we talked to and got, estimates from and proposals from, all were willing to, eager to promote the heat pump stuff, but primarily because of the rebates. And they could not understand, even when pressed, they didn't want to get into the whole issue of, why wouldn't you use gas since you already have gas in the house? And I said, because I don't want to. But they are, I think, the chief fear to overcome in communication with these, RFP installers is that people are going to be completely scared by a change in their monthly bill from whatever, Eversource and Natick, for instance. Will your monthly energy costs go up? They figure that if they push the idea of a heat pump and then somebody sees their first bill is more expensive, they're going to panic and think they can't afford to have the thing. And they're not looking at the payback, the long-term alliance, the value added to the resale price of the home. Frankly, MIT did a study on that. I've talked to Sam Griffin, I guess, about this, and I'm happy to do this, happy to coach this. But I think getting the installers to the point where they're willing to talk about it is the big obstacle in this HeatSmart program.
I totally agree with you, and that's why we're trying to establish our first, in order to get to the point where we as volunteers can have some credibility, is to establish some basis for trust with the installers, which I know I've personally got that level with several installers. And we do that through supporting them, but it's a huge problem because apart from the cost issue, they are still not trusting heat pump technology. They are coming in and they quote things, and they don't want, the last thing they want is to do a new installation and then the first 5-degree day get a call back from that customer that the home's uncomfortable, and so they are guarding against that. I've seen many installations where they put in a heat pump that's capable of heating the house down to the single digits, but they set the swap over temperature to the fossil fuel system in the 30 to 40 degree range, and it's therefore not really displacing as much fossil fuel usage as it could. So this is totally.
Steve, if I could add, it isn't just the installing, it isn't just the salesperson and the installers who come in, it's also the service people.
Yes.
Even though I've been clear with the firm that we used, I love them. They did a great job installing it. It's a wonderful system. We did have a circuit breaker problem, which is an electrical problem, not a heat pump, not a use of heat pump, but it happened on nights where the temperature plummeted 30, 40 degrees and, overnight.
Yep.
And when they came in, they had the same bias, which is, you were using a heat pump. Why weren't you using?
No, this is and this is a large part of my personal but I think for the HeatSmart Alliance, if we can start to the installers need to be brought into this. And one of our comments on the 2030 CECP is that there's no mention of the installers as a critical stakeholder, and they need to be brought into this through the state programs. They need to be incented, and they need to, and it's even to the point where the current mass save incentives are based on the size of the heat pump, which I've had installers tell me they quoted a larger heat pump than needed because it qualified for a bigger incentive. And with heat pumps, oversizing them is as much a problem as undersizing them. So,
well, that's why it's good to get several bids. I
yeah.
got several bids, including one, the
Yeah.
first one with a firm from Mass Save who suggested it. And their bid, by the way, was insanely low, so low that it was very tempting, but too low for me to be comfortable that I didn't
Yeah.
need to bet
Rick,
that.
I'd be happy to talk with you more offline. If you
fine.
want send me contact info through the chat, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions to take, Andy?
Yeah, so we have just a few minutes left. Badri has their hand up, and then we can go over to Ed Schwartz.
Okay.
Great. One of the questions, and maybe this is a joint answer with Natick in some sense, is, are you seeing a trend line in terms of what types of quotes we get for sort of like the Solar Challenge program? If you did a large build out or a large order set, what we might be getting in terms of a trend for pricing? I asked this last year just before COVID or just into COVID. I had a geothermal estimate for a 5-ton system in itself, and my footprint is, I computed my gas footprint is about, natural gas footprint is about 6 metric tons of carbon, and came in at about 50K number.
Yeah.
And so that's a big number to put in on a retrofit at this point. So I was just
yeah. Well,
figuring
so
out.
the first thing I would say is that if it was a ground source, you probably could have gotten about at least 50% of that as back as through tax credits and incentives. So with they've diminished the last 2 years and will diminish more. But I think with the new administration in Washington, hopefully the federal tax credit will come back at a more aggressive level. But out of that 50K, the thing I would say is that you probably could have gotten 25K, and roughly speaking, in incentive.
Yes, my net effect came out to be like 28 or 29K, or somewhere between 28 to 32K, depending on how I looked at it, and it would have to be backed up with an electric heat for Insta, right? So I looked at it and said, if I'm going to put 30K for 6 tons of carbon, I could sequester or pay somebody to plant trees.
Right. Yeah, there is a if you look at it in those terms, but there's a societal cost that isn't fully factored in, I think.
Correct.
And you need and it's not, again, the difference is with solar, people could see some payback. There was a payback period. With heating, you need a heating system. You don't have an option. You need to have heat. And if your current system is worn out, you got to spend something to replace it. So the cost you should be looking at is what was the incremental cost of doing the ground source versus doing a reasonably efficient replacement for your existing heating and cooling system. And in that case, the cost delta is much lower, and you can get down to a level where you can say, well, the dollars per ton of carbon saved is in the realm of a reasonable expense. But I understand where you're coming from there.